According to the Nationwide Children's Hospital, teenagers need about 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep every night, but the average teenager only gets around 7 to 7.5 hours. These students are missing out on 2 hours of sleep every night that research shows they really need. But how can we expect our students to get 9 hours of sleep every night if they have to get up at 5 or 6 a.m. to get ready for the day and to be at school by 7? I'm someone who went to a middle school and high school that started at 7:45 a.m. and I've experienced the negative effects of an early school start time, and many others have as well. However, nationwide legislation that bans schools from starting before 8:30 a.m. would increase the amount of sleep students get, which would reduce the effects of not getting enough sleep, and it would leave teenagers feeling more healthy and overall more productive. While not getting enough sleep is not the only problem that stems from early school start times, it is the biggest and arguably the most important. Lack of sleep causes teenagers to struggle mentally, physically, and emotionally. Studies show that students who get less sleep are more likely to get bad grades. It's also shown to cause problems with cognitive abilities such as attention, memory, and decision making. But lack of sleep doesn't just cause mental problems for teens, it also causes physical issues as well. When I decided to write about this topic, I asked my roommates what their experiences were because I wanted to get a personal experience other than my own. They're all from different cities, but they all started school at 8 a.m. or earlier, and they said that the biggest problem basically was just that they were trying to get as much sleep as they could, and a lot of times they didn't have enough time to eat breakfast. This is obviously a huge problem because breakfast gives us energy for the day, and it's extremely important for teens. So if my roommates are saying they had this problem, I did this some days too. It's probably a common theme for teens, and that's another big issue. According to the Child Mind Institute, teens who get less sleep have an increased risk of unintentional injuries and car accidents. Sleep deprivation is also linked to obesity, and not getting enough sleep causes imbalances in our hormones. So this means that people who don't get enough sleep might be too tired to exercise, the hormones that signal hunger may not be in balance, or they may simply eat more because they're awake for a longer period of time than the average person. And these aren't the only problems caused by a lack of sleep. It also has a big effect on the social life of teens. So research shows that lack of sleep in teens is linked to the inability to self-regulate. This means that teens have less control of their emotion, impulses, and moods. While there's many stereotypes about teenagers being moody and out of control, which is partly because of all of the changes happening in their lives, lack of sleep could very well be contributing to these mood swings and impulsive behaviors. On an episode of The Early Show on CBS, they said teens that got 5 hours of sleep or less per night were 71% more likely to report depression, and teens that went to bed after midnight were also more likely to suffer from depression. So we've seen the consequences of teens not getting enough sleep, but what can we do to help them? Well, as I said earlier, a nationwide ban on schools starting before 8:30 a.m. would encourage these students to get more sleep, and we could be avoiding at least some of these issues. So what would this ban include? Obviously, this would just force schools to start at 8:30 a.m. or later. If schools did not abide by this rule, then they would be fined and school funding could be cut. I found an article from a news station in California that was posted on August 1st of this year, and it described a new bill in the California state legislature that would do exactly this. It would ban middle schools and high schools from starting before 8:30 a.m. So this is not an unreasonable proposition, and people are really seeing all the research surrounding this topic and how we can help out our teenagers with just a small change in start times. Now, if we think about the potential that these students have with a later start time, not only do they feel more awake and ready to learn, but they're truly healthier mentally, physically, and emotionally by getting that extra sleep that they wouldn't have before. Students would be more productive academically, which means higher test scores. They'd be physically healthier, whether it be by having that extra time to eat breakfast every day or just getting the more sleep that our bodies need. This would also have a direct impact on better emotional control and less reports of depression in teens. So even though we know that these are things that happen when students get more sleep, it's also important to look at school districts that have tried moving their start times back and the effects that it's had. Researchers at the University of Minnesota did a 3-year study which included 9,000 high school students from 8 public schools in 3 states. They studied the effect on school start times that were pushed back. And what they found was that when schools start at 8:30 or later, more than 60% of students were able to get 8 hours of sleep or more per night. One website I looked at while researching this topic said that only about a quarter of high school students are getting 8 hours of sleep. So 60% is really good. Along with this, academic performance and test scores improved, and the number of car accidents for teen drivers was reduced by 70% for a school that changed their start time from 7:35 a.m. to 8:55 a.m. So clearly, all of this information is pointing to students doing better academically, physically, and emotionally with later school start times. If we want the future generations to be successful, not only in their careers, but in their personal lives as well, then it's really important for us to put in place nationwide legislation banning schools from starting before 8:30 a.m.